There are wounds that don't come from chance or misunderstanding, but from someone's deliberate choice to hurt you. And when that happens, the soul stirs with a bitter mix of shock, anger, and disappointment. It hurts more when the blow comes from someone you knew well, because the pain isn't just about what happened, it's about what you thought was real. You ask yourself over and over how they could do it, and your mind keeps imagining that one day they'll regret it. But while you wait for that emotional justice, your peace comes to a halt. The real question isn't whether they'll regret it, but how to keep their harm from continuing to rule your life. We've all gone through moments when resentment feels like the only refuge left, a way of saying, "I won't forget what you did to me." Yet that fire we swear to aim outward ends up burning us from within. What no one taught us is that forgiveness doesn't mean justification, and letting go doesn't mean forgetting. Stoic wisdom offers a different path, turning the wound into strength, anger into clarity, and boundaries into dignity. Not to make the other person change, but so that your serenity no longer depends on what someone else does or doesn't do. If this is your first time here, my name is Gabriel. For years I've studied and applied Stoicism in everyday life, especially in those moments when calm seems impossible. In this space, I share tools and reflections to heal from inner strength, without denying pain but without making it your fate. I invite you to subscribe if you're looking to rebuild your peace and regain your dignity without losing your sensitivity. Stay until the end, because the final reflection in this video might help you see that even the most unfair pain can be transformed into freedom. Let's begin. There's a kind of pain that cuts differently, the one that comes from someone you knew, someone you trusted, and who still chose to hurt you. It's not the blow of a stranger, but the crack left by the betrayal of someone close. When that happens, you're left hanging between disbelief and anger. It's not just about what they did, but about everything they silently destroyed: trust, innocence, the belief in an unspoken bond of respect. The heart tries to understand what part of you caused that wound, as if finding a reason could bring relief. But in truth, that search often becomes a maze with no exit, because not everything that happens has a reason that includes us. Stoicism teaches that the first step is to distinguish between what depends on you and what doesn't. And here lies the beginning of freedom. It's not up to you whether someone acts with decency, but it is up to you not to let their misery settle inside you. It's a hard boundary to draw when the offense still burns, but a necessary one if you don't want pain to turn into identity. Without realizing it, we often keep giving power to that person by thinking about them, replaying the moment, imagining their regret. Every repeated thought is another rope that ties you to the harm. I once heard a metaphor that stayed with me. Fire burns, not because it wants to hurt, but because it touches what isn't withdrawn in time. Human pain works the same way. If you keep your hand over the fire of what was done to you, the burn continues, not because of their action, but because you remain in the memory. This doesn't mean denying what happened, but learning to pull your attention away from what you can't change. The Stoics said that freedom begins in judgment, not in circumstance, and that's where healing begins. So far, we've understood that prolonged suffering arises when we confuse someone else's actions with our own worth. That's why the second step is to rebuild that inner distinction. You are not what was done to you, you are what you choose to do with it. When you shift that perspective, even the cruelest act loses its power to define you. You become, in Seneca's words, your own refuge when the world turns hostile. It's a quiet but steadfast declaration of power. They can't decide what you think, only how you respond. There's something deeply freeing about accepting that you may never get an apology, or that if it comes, you might not need it anymore. When you reach that point, your vision clears. Anger steps out of the spotlight and your soul begins to look forward again. There's no revenge deeper than the calm the other never expected. Sometimes, silence, when born from understanding, is the most powerful response. And with that in mind, it's worth looking honestly at what happens inside when we refuse to let go of that wound. Because resentment, no matter how justified it feels, carries a trap that few notice in time. Resentment is like an invisible chain you put on yourself, believing it will keep the other person bound, when in truth, it's you who becomes the prisoner. Sometimes we feel that letting go of anger means betraying ourselves, that to stop thinking about the injustice is the same as forgiving the unforgivable. But resentment doesn't protect you. It wears you down, ages you, and dries you out. It's the echo of a story that's already over, but keeps replaying inside you like a broken record. We tell ourselves we don't want to think about it anymore, yet every silence fills with that same inner voice that keeps reliving the offense. What was once just a memory becomes a way of living, an identity built on the wound. The Stoics spoke of this trap with almost surgical precision. Epictetus said that it's not what happens to us that harms us, but our opinion of what happens. If you believe your worth was diminished by the harm someone caused you, then you've handed them power over your peace of mind. And that's what resentment does. It convinces you that keeping the pain alive keeps your dignity alive. But it's the opposite. Every time you feed that thought, you give away a little more of your energy. It's like drinking poison and hoping it hurts the one who gave it to you. Imagine for a moment that you're carrying a backpack full of stones. Each one represents a grievance, a betrayal, a word that still hurts. You walk with it every day. At first, you think it's not that heavy, but over time your body bends, your breath shortens, and your light dims. That backpack is resentment, and every day you carry it, it takes you further from the inner lightness you long for. It's not about denying what happened, it's about no longer carrying it as part of who you are. We've already understood that real damage happens when you give space to the offense in your mind. So the challenge isn't to erase the memory, but to look at it without feeding the emotion. The Stoics practice something called premeditation of adversity, a way of visualizing possible offenses so that, when they came, the soul wouldn't be caught off guard. We can do the same with the past. Remember without reliving. Observe what happened as if it were a scene from a play that's already ended. The spectator doesn't suffer, they learn. I like to think of the story of the master who gave his disciple a sack full of stones and told him to carry it for weeks. When the young man returned exhausted, the wise teacher said, "Now drop one stone for every person you believe you've forgiven." As the disciple let them fall one by one, he began to cry, not for what he remembered, but for what he had been holding on to. That's how freedom comes, by letting go, not by forgetting. After this, it's worth looking at the other side of anger, the force we often hide beneath resentment, which needs to be expressed differently so it doesn't turn into poison. Because anger, when repressed, festers, but when understood, it transforms into clarity. Anger appears like a fire that promises justice, but if you don't learn to direct it, it ends up burning everything it touches, even what you love. When someone hurts you on purpose, your first natural reaction is to feel that fire rising inside, the tension in your body, the shortness of breath, the words ready to spill out unfiltered. Denying that emotion only makes it stronger because unacknowledged anger turns into resentment. True wisdom isn't about eliminating anger, but learning to govern it. The Stoics used to say that no sea becomes navigable without understanding the wind, and anger is that wind which, when properly channeled, can drive just action. We've already seen that resentment ties us to the past, but anger, when misdirected, can trap us in the exact moment of the hurt. To tame it doesn't mean to repress it. It means allowing it to be expressed without destruction. A practical way to start is to observe your body when it appears, where it tenses, how you breathe, what words arise. In that moment, you can do something as simple as stopping and taking 3 deep breaths. It might not seem like much, but within that tiny space between impulse and action lies freedom. That's where you decide whether to react or respond. I remember a family argument that changed the way I understood anger. Someone said something unfair, and every part of me wanted to respond with the same harshness. But something inside chose silence, not out of fear, but out of a decision not to add more noise. That silence wasn't cowardice. It was the moment I realized that not everything deserves a response. Days later, that person came to me with regret, and I understood that calmness can also be a mirror, showing others their own lack of control. Since then, I've learned that there is no greater power than self-mastery. The Stoics often said emotions are not enemies, but messengers. Properly understood, anger points to where an injustice or a broken boundary exists. But if we mistake it for the urge to punish, we lose its wisdom. The question isn't, how do I stop being angry? But what is this anger showing me that I need to protect? Maybe it's revealing that someone has crossed a boundary you failed to set, or that you've stayed silent for too long. Seeing it this way turns the emotion into a compass. There is no serenity without vital energy, and no healthy energy without direction. That's why daily practice means choosing balance again and again. You can write about what you feel, go for a walk, pray, breathe deeply, or simply observe without acting. Every time you choose not to give in to impulse, you strengthen your self-respect. Calm isn't weakness, it's strength under control. The one who masters their anger doesn't go dim, they shine. Still, fire needs a channel. If you trap it completely, it suffocates. If you let it loose, it destroys. In daily life, that means learning to say what bothers you without shouting, to set boundaries without humiliating, and to express pain without dramatizing. Taming anger means accepting its presence, understanding its language, and transforming it into conscious action. And here I'd like to invite you to do something simple. If this message is helping you see your emotions differently, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share your name and country in the comments. I love knowing where you're listening from and reading what resonates with you. Tell me too, what practices help you stay calm when someone provokes or hurts you? I read every message carefully because this space is built as much from your experiences as from my words. That said, let's get back to the topic, because anger only becomes wisdom when we learn to use it to protect who we are. And that brings us to a crucial point, learning to set boundaries without resentment, with the quiet strength of someone who already understands their own worth. When anger fades and clarity appears, one of the hardest and most noble acts begins: setting boundaries. Saying enough without rage, speaking firmly without the need to hurt. It's a gesture that can be frightening, especially if you grew up believing that love meant enduring, or that being a good person meant tolerating more than what's fair. But the truth is, setting boundaries is an act of respect, both toward yourself and the other person. Without boundaries, there is no relationship, only exhaustion. And those who've been hurt must relearn that protecting themselves doesn't make them cold, but conscious. Up to this point, we've understood that anger can be transformed into directed energy. Now that energy must become concrete action. The boundary is that action. It's not about punishment or teaching the other person a lesson. It's about teaching yourself that your peace is non-negotiable. Every time you tolerate a wrong out of fear of losing a connection, you're silently saying, "My dignity is worth less than your approval." And in time, that comes at a high cost. Setting a boundary means declaring yourself responsible for your own well-being. It's saying, "I won't allow this anymore," without needing to prove it through shouting or dramatic disappearances. I remember a student who once told me through tears that she always forgave her adult daughter after every insult because she feared that confronting her would mean losing her forever. One day, she simply said calmly, "I love you, but I can't keep talking to you when you insult me." There was no reproach, no speech, just clarity. At first, her daughter pulled away, then she returned with respect. The boundary didn't break their bond, it purified it. That's the magic of firm love. It doesn't seek to control, it seeks to protect what truly matters. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a calm soul is invulnerable because it has no need to impose itself. From that spirit, a boundary becomes a luminous frontier, not a wall. You can love and still say no. You can understand and still walk away. You can feel compassion and still keep your door closed. That's not contradiction, it's maturity. A boundary isn't the opposite of love, it's the truest way to sustain it. In practice, this means examining how many times you've said yes when you wanted to say no, and how often you've stayed silent out of fear of others' reactions. You may discover that much of your exhaustion comes from living in constant adaptation to others. The first boundary is set within. Stop justifying what hurts you. Once you do that, the boundaries you set outward flow naturally, without tension. Sometimes others won't accept your new way of being, and that's where the real test begins, standing firm without giving in to manipulation. Many will mistake your serenity for coldness, but that doesn't matter. Life rewards coherence. When you stay true to your values, even when it hurts, something inside you aligns, and little by little, those who can't respect you drift away, while those who value you truthfully draw closer. With that clear, we open another door. After the boundary comes inner reconstruction. Because when someone hurts you intentionally, it's not only the offense that wounds, it also cracks your trust in yourself. And regaining that inner faith is the step that turns pain into strength. When someone hurts you intentionally, they don't just destroy a bond, they also shake your perception of yourself. You start wondering if you were naive, if you missed the signs, if you lacked courage or wisdom. That doubt is the deepest wound because it erodes faith in your own judgment. And without that trust, everything wavers. Your decisions, your relationships, even the way you look at yourself in the mirror. But it's possible to rebuild it, and the path begins with a simple truth. You didn't lose your worth, you just forgot how to see yourself without guilt. We've already learned that setting boundaries restores your self-respect. Now it's time to return to yourself. The Stoics taught that dignity doesn't depend on others' opinions, but on the harmony between what you think, say, and do. When you reach that alignment, even if the world rejects you, your soul rests. Rebuilding trust doesn't require others to change how they treat you. It requires you to change how you speak to yourself. Stop talking to yourself like a critic and start speaking like a companion. Every compassionate thought is a new brick in the rebuilding of your strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul should be like a rock against which the waves break, not because it feels nothing, but because it endures. That image might seem cold, but it's deeply human. The rock doesn't defend itself. It simply stands firm. When someone has hurt you, you don't need to build walls. You need roots. And those roots grow in silence, in routine, in the constancy of small acts of self-love. Getting up each day and caring for yourself, even when you don't feel like it, is a quiet form of faith. There's a simple practice that helps. Look at yourself in the mirror, hold your own gaze, and recall 3 things you still value about yourself. No matter how small, maybe your patience, your ability to forgive, or simply your desire to heal. That look is a reconciliation with the person you were before the pain, and in that daily act, the voice of judgment begins to lose its power. Ask yourself honestly, what would happen if today you chose to believe in yourself again, even if no one else did? Trust rebuilds when you allow yourself not to have all the answers, yet keep moving forward anyway. Don't wait to feel ready before you act. It's by acting that you regain faith. The Stoics called this the practice of virtue, meaning to embody the qualities you wish to feel. If you want to feel strong, do something that reflects strength, even if your voice trembles. If you long for serenity, take a breath before responding. Action comes before emotion, not the other way around. Over time, that renewed relationship with yourself becomes an invisible shield. You no longer need to prove anything. Others' judgment loses weight, and the past stops being your reference point. You start to realize that the regret you once hoped for from the other person no longer matters, because what truly frees you is your own forgiveness. Not toward the one who hurt you, but toward yourself, for staying trapped in that memory for so long. And behind this quiet process, a luminous truth emerges. When your peace becomes your priority, the world changes color, not because it's kinder, but because you no longer break under its hardness. From that new strength, revenge loses all meaning. What matters now is your inner freedom. And that's where the most elegant revenge begins, the one that seeks not to destroy, but to live in peace. There's a quiet kind of revenge that unsettles those who hurt you, your serenity, because someone who harms you on purpose expects you to fall apart, to react, to confirm their power. But when instead you choose calm, you dismantle their strategy. Nothing confuses an aggressor more than a victim who no longer behaves like one. And this isn't about pride or indifference, it's about maturity. You've moved through anger, released resentment, and set your boundaries. Now comes the reward, living well even if they never apologize. The Stoics spoke of virtuous revenge as the natural result of wisdom, overcoming evil with good, not out of weakness, but out of intelligence. Epictetus said that those who cause harm are the ones most in need of compassion because they live enslaved by their own nature. If you respond with the same darkness, you become their equal. If you choose peace, you rise above. There's no greater triumph than the serenity of someone who no longer reacts. It's a victory not shouted but lived, in silence and presence. Sometimes that serenity takes time to arrive because the body remembers before the mind does. You still feel the tension, even after forgiving, and that's okay. Healing isn't a straight line. Some days, calm feels forced. Others, it comes naturally. What matters is holding on to the intention. Every time you choose not to retaliate, not to lose yourself in the same noise, you're rewriting your story. The deepest revenge is looking at your life later on and realizing that despite everything, you flourished. I remember a story about an older woman who, after years of humiliation, decided to step away from conflict and dedicate herself to her garden. While the one who mistreated her kept repeating his same patterns, she was planting flowers. One day, he walked past her house and saw her laughing among the roses. No words were exchanged, but truth was there. She had won. Not because he suffered, but because she had chosen to live. Sometimes simply moving on in peace is the most powerful message you can send. Once you understand this, the idea of revenge loses its appeal. You no longer need to prove anything. Time and life do that for you. Seneca said, "No harm befalls the wise person, even if it seems a harm." That phrase sums up the strength of self-awareness. Everything done to you becomes raw material for something greater. Suffering, when met with consciousness, transforms into wisdom. Serenity isn't achieved by escaping the world, but by choosing how to exist within it. The person who hurt you may never change, but your response can, and that's enough. Every genuine smile, every restful night, every day without replaying the past is a form of victory. You don't need punishment or apology. Their regret no longer defines you. You've stopped orbiting their shadow and started walking toward your own light. And with that clarity, we reach the highest point of this journey. Understanding that self-love isn't a temporary refuge after pain, but a lasting force that sustains your entire life. An unbreakable love that doesn't depend on how you're treated, but on the truth you choose to live each day. After moving through anger, resentment, and the need for justice, you reach a different shore. You no longer seek the other person's regret or even their understanding. You just want peace. And within that calm, a deeper kind of love begins to grow. A self-love that doesn't fade when life turns hard, that doesn't need approval to feel valid. This love isn't vanity or cheap self-help. It's the quiet awareness of your worth, even when no one else sees it. It's looking at yourself in silence and knowing you survived what you once thought would destroy you. The Stoics said that virtue means living in harmony with nature, and part of that nature is loving yourself, not excessively, but without neglect. When you truly love yourself, you don't compare, you don't beg, you don't plead for presence. You know who you are and act in alignment with it. Self-love is the ultimate antidote to others' harm because it reminds you that what others do doesn't change your essence. You can't control whether someone hurts you, but you can decide whether that blow will define the rest of your story. We've already seen that serenity is the most powerful response, but maintaining it requires constant care. Just as a muscle strengthens through practice, self-love grows through small daily gestures. Eating well, resting, saying no when something feels heavy, surrounding yourself with people who bring peace, not those who demand you lose it. It's not selfishness, it's wisdom. Every act of self-care is a quiet declaration. I matter, and my well-being matters. I once heard a woman say, "It took me 50 years to understand that I wasn't born to convince anyone to love me." That sentence says it all. Loving your life as it is, even with its losses, is the highest point of maturity. Self-love isn't built from perfection, but from acceptance. It's not about erasing pain, but about learning to stand by yourself while it heals. People often mistake self-love for hardness, but it's not about closing yourself off. It's about not breaking. It's like being a strong tree. Its branches bend with the wind, but its roots keep it grounded. You can cry, feel nostalgic, have doubts, and still stand tall. That flexibility is the clearest sign of growth. Because when you love yourself, you don't harden, you grow wise. Unbreakable self-love doesn't seek to punish or prove superiority. It simply shines. And when you shine from calmness, those who hurt you are forced to face their own reflection. You don't need words, your peace says everything. Life has a quiet but precise way of balancing things. Those who harm eventually face their own actions. Those who heal find their freedom. And with that, we arrive at the point where there's nothing left to prove, only to live. What once hurt now teaches. What once weighed you down now sustains you. You've learned to protect your peace without closing your heart, to turn pain into wisdom and wounds into doors. From here, the natural closure isn't forgetting, it's gratitude, because realizing that even pain had a purpose is the beginning of true serenity. This journey began with a wound, with the shock of being hurt on purpose, and ends with a deeper awareness. No one can steal your peace if you choose to keep it. Throughout this path, you've seen that another's harm doesn't define you, that resentment is a subtle trap, that anger can be transformed into clarity, and that setting boundaries isn't distance, but respect. You've understood that serenity isn't forgetting, it's choosing, and that self-love, when cultivated with patience, becomes the noblest form of revenge, continuing to live with dignity. Thank you for staying until the end, for allowing yourself to hear these words and recognize a part of your story in them. Every person who makes it this far helps sustain this space of reflection, where we learn together to live with greater calm and meaning. Your presence, your time, and your openness are what keep this community alive. What we do here isn't just talk about pain, it's learn how to transform it into shared strength. My name is Gabriel, and my purpose is to remind you that you can always choose to protect your peace even when others don't change. That's the heart of this philosophy, to live with serenity, with clear boundaries, and with gratitude for what remains. I'm honored that you're here, growing, reflecting, and walking alongside this process that makes us more human and more free. Now I'd like to ask you for something simple, but meaningful. Tell me in the comments which country you're listening from, and write this phrase to seal what you've learned today. My serenity is my revenge. It's a way to affirm that you've chosen peace over resentment. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share it. It might be exactly what helps them let go. Remember, every time you share, you help expand this wisdom and strengthen the circle of those who seek to live with greater awareness. Next, you'll see 2 videos on screen. Choose one and continue deepening on this path of growth and wisdom. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for staying. May your peace become your home and your serenity your greatest strength.